Better line out by Ulster. Barker won it. Pienaar, Paddy Jackson. Marshall, that look forward. Referees let it go. Here goes Spence. What a start by Spence. Needs a little bit of support. Moves it wide to Nevin Spence, but a football from young Spence. It's still there. Spence, what a score by the youngster.
Now, he was on the brink of a promising future as an Irish rugby international, but Nevin Spence's future has been snatched away at just 22 by a tragic accident on his family farm.
Inseparable in life, they died trying to help each other. The family's poignant tribute to Noel Spence and his two sons, Graham and Nevin, who lost their lives in an accident on the family farm.
He was born in Ulster. He came through school in Ulster. He played rugby for Ulster, and all he wanted to do for the remainder of his career was to stay here, win trophies and be successful with Ulster.
Suddenly the three men of our house were gone. My mum and dad's family had suddenly been split in two in a matter of moments. Probably the impact of what has happened really has shown the sort of person that he was. He had no airs and graces about himself. Nevin, growing up, he was one of these kids that, for me, took great pride in being the annoying wee brother, and often said it would have been like trying to be up to tricks. And Nevin and Graham and even my dad were always up for a wee bit of banter and laugh. And it's sometimes when I see a group of boys laughing together and playing tricks on each other, I do just sort of smile, because that was so them. They enjoyed life and loved winding you up and playing tricks or doing whatever. And Nevin was one of these ones that he was sickeningly good at everything. He was good at every sport that he touched. He was even good at drawing and painting. Probably my mother would say he was better than me. Just anything that he put his hand to, he was good at.
I came across Nevin when we visited his primary school, St John's. His mother, Essie, was a teacher. Small primary school outside Dromore. And of course I was told what an outstanding athlete this guy was, and he'll go on, he'll play for this, that and the other. Pinch of salt, because we hear that at every primary school, but nonetheless, as he bedded into school, it became apparent this guy was strong, he was quick, he was modest, he was humble, he was just an outstanding guy from the early doors in Dromore. He was very involved in football. In any other school this would have become a tug of war, but we could quickly see that Nevin had a great interest in both sports, both rugby and football.
Before rugby, Nevin was a footballer. Nevin played for Lisburn Youth. Back then, Lisburn Youth were a very accomplished club in Northern Ireland. Nevin was selected for Northern Ireland schools under 16 squad. Nevin that season was being tracked by Manchester City. He also had a trial with Sunderland.
He made his way into the Northern Ireland under 16 Victory Shield team. He played in the first Northern Ireland team that beat England in the Victory Shield in England. He played 8 games there and 8 international fixtures. Still playing rugby, of course, both at school and in the local club when he could.
When the under 16 season was over, Nevin was fortunate to be selected into the under 17 Northern Ireland squad to participate in the Euro qualifiers. It was a 20-man squad and they were based in Northern Ireland. So the first qualifying game was down at Mourneview Park, and then the team was announced, and unfortunately Nevin never got into the starting 11 or in the subs bench. That night myself and a number of the other coaches went down to watch the game, and Nevin, being Nevin, came up to us, sat beside us in the stand, talking football. And then as the game went on, he asked me a question, and I knew Nevin already had the answer to the question. And the question was, what would you think if I stopped playing football and focused on rugby? And it was one of those where you just sat and thought about it, and you says, Nevin, do you know what? You have an international cap in football as a youth international. It'd be great if you got one for rugby as well. Through his passion for sport and through his just sheer eagerness to be the best that he could be, the rest is history.
Nevin came here from Dromore High School in 2006 to complete his A-levels. And from the start, he was very easy to get on with. He developed an excellent rapport with the staff and with the pupils alike, and he was very, very well thought of. He was very hard-working, both academically and on the rugby pitch, and he had a really, really high work ethic. He scored a lot of tries, but it was really his explosiveness on the pitch, you know, his ability to break a tackle, to make tackles, and just that fight, you know, and rugby was fun to him, and I think even when he went to Ulster it was fun. It was a game, it was still a game to him, and he enjoyed it, and I think that certainly is one of his key attributes. He never took himself or the game too seriously, but he just wanted to play for fun.
I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to coach him at Ballynahinch. I think I can remember his first game against, I think it was Rainey away. And he was only 18 years old, maybe in the academy, and I think everyone was in awe of just how he conducted himself that day. You know, superb pace, physicality, you know, great aggression, never took a step backwards. But overall, I suppose it was his attitude to everything, training and playing, was of the highest standard, and it was a pleasure to coach and a pleasure to know.
One of the secrets to Nevin was not only his humility, but also his ability to fight on the pitch and go to the end, and he was always a 100%er. The other thing that made him special was he didn't realise how good he was.
Like, he definitely didn't realise how good he actually was. I think that's the biggest shock for me whenever I got to meet Nevin's family, is that I don't think Essie, his mum, ever went to a rugby match, which just, you know, shocked me massively. He was just too humble and didn't want I don't think he wanted his family to know actually how good he really was, because I think he struggled with that. Never really wanted to make a big deal of himself, and that was just his personality. And it was very easy to say Ulster players, they give anything for the shirt, but Nevin was a guy who literally gave anything for the shirt and would have done anything for anyone, really. He went above and beyond, and that was just his character. And it's scary to think that, well, you know, he reached the top level, but imagine what he could have done. I know he reached Ireland A level, but without a doubt he would have been definitely a full international and would have been a massive leader in this Ulster team for many, many years.
It's a funny one, because I think what Nevin's personality that you saw on the rugby pitch was very different to what he was like off the pitch. You know, on the pitch, everyone saw someone who was uncompromising. He was hard as nails. He had ran through a brick wall for you, and he was a very, very talented player. But off the pitch, he was like very, very grounded, very humble. It just was such a nice guy to spend time with.
Once he got into the Ulster senior team, I had a friend, still have a friend at the club, in Gareth Robinson, and Gareth invited me up one day where Nevin, of course, was on the treatment table, and the idea was for Nevin to walk out and I would be in the car park, and that happened. During our conversation, a young primary school kid came over and he says, "Excuse me, Nevin, could I have your autograph?" And Nevin just looked at me and puzzled face, bemusement, and he just went, and I said, "Nevin, I'll see you in a few minutes." And he went over, signed the autograph, and the next thing he walked over and he just looked at me and went, "That's a first." And my reply to Nevin was, "Get used to it."
He was a very humble guy, and he loved the rugby but hated the spotlight. And we loved teasing him when we were out and about. I remember once we went to Frankie and Benny's, and there was a group of girls looked at him as soon as we went in, and he was like, "Oh dear, no." And we were like, right "Oh," and then and we were sat right beside them, and they ended up getting the waiter's notepad to come up and ask for his autograph, and he hated it. And we always just Ian used to shout his name going into Sainsbury's and be like, "Oh, you Nevin Spence, are you?" And he would just run off, but he hated it.
I think everyone will probably say the same thing. There's a lot of bad jokes from Nevin.
Awful jokes was a big one that he loved, and everyone else just kind of shook their head as to say that that's not on.
He had these crap jokes, but you know, when he told them, for some reason they were hilarious. One of them was, and the one we always talk about is, there's a man going around town stealing gates. Don't confront him or he may take offence. And of course he thought this hilarious, but like anytime we hear that sort of joke now, or a joke like that, like it's funny for different reasons for us, but ultimately it's also tinged with a little bit of sadness and emotion, because that is one of the big things he'll be remembered for.
Nevin was in his bedroom and I was like, "Where are you going? What are you at?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just going over to see a uni friend for the weekend. I'm heading over to Bath and I'll be back, sure, I'll see you then." And I was like, "All right, have a good time, hope it's good fun." I never thought anything more of it until a couple of days later somebody approached me and was like, "Oh, congratulations on Nevin, he's doing really, really well, isn't he?" And I vacantly was like, yeah, he's doing well. What is he doing? Is what I was thinking in my head. And I went home and I was like, "Dad, what is Nevin at this week? Is he in Bath?" And my dad sort of chuckled a wee bit and was like, is that what he told you? And I was like, "Yes, he's not in Bath. What is he doing?" And my dad was like, "Emma, he's at the Ireland camp." Yeah, so the whole of the country knew. It was in the papers that my brother was in the Ireland camp, and I hadn't a clue. I thought he was in Bath seeing his university friends. But like, that's just a typical example of Nevin. He was extremely humble, and so were Dad and Graham. They would never have said to you, "Oh, I'm playing for Ulster." It would have been, "I'm Nevin."
He'd probably be really embarrassed if he knew I was telling the story, but we walked through Belfast and there was a lady begging, and going past a sports shop, and he was like, do you want to head in there and have a look? I'll be in a minute. And I didn't realise, but he had actually ran across the road and got food and bought it for her and brought it back and gave it to her. But I wouldn't have known that other than the fact that I was going outside to see what was taking him so long. You know, you wouldn't have done, kind of came in and be like, "Oh, guess what I've done," you know. And like, we were only 18 or 19, like, and you know, that was whenever he was starting to become known, and you know, because of the rugby. And he was still the normal Nevin who was humble and like compassionate and wanted to do things like that, and wouldn't have done it for any praise or adulation from any of us.
He was an incredible player for his tender years. People were talking him up all of the time, saying that he was going to go on to do great things in the game, and I've no doubt of that. But I think he never became a big-time Charlie. He retained that ordinariness and that humility that was just exceptional and stood out actually from a lot of his peers.
He was wise beyond his years. He took a lot of wisdom from his dad. A lot of the time, if you're talking about something with him, he'd say, "Well, you know, my dad said, my dad says," and that kind of rubbed off on us a bit.
The values, characteristics, his morals, he learned from nobody better than his big brother and his father. And even the way they died that day, I think Ballynahinch Rugby Club summed it up very well with a quote. They put, "Humanity defies logic when it comes to love." And that was them. They loved each other. Maybe they weren't the sort of fellas to say it, but they were there for each other right to the end.
Just before the start of the season, I met Nevin on the pitch at the centre circle, and he talked about his targets for the season, and his goal was to get his name on the wall with 100 appearances, because he knew that he was capable of doing that. He knew himself that he was going to be a one club man, and then unfortunately Nevin was playing for the Ravens on a Friday night, I was at Ravenhill watching Ulster, the senior team will play Munster, and we beat Munster, I think, by a point. And I texted him, and he says, I'm on my way to Ravenhill to meet up with the boys. The following day, I was out coaching, came home, and I got a phone call from Gigi, Ulster physio, and he broke the sad news about Nev.
We were speaking to him that day. We were at a rugby game with him that morning.
We were meant to be playing FIFA after he came home from milking.
Yeah,
Remember,
that's right.
we were all meant to meet up.
We were actually meant to go to the farm in that afternoon, and it was raining, so we didn't bother. And then we were supposed to be then going to the house that night, so we hadn't heard from him, so we knew something was up. And then it's all a bit of a blur, like, because it was
just kind of like a weird atmosphere.
It was really surreal. We were like, how could that be the case? Because he was just there, you know.
I was living with Darren Cave at the time, and a lot of the team all just came around to ours, and yeah, it was a time where we all just stayed close, and it's sadly something that should never happen to anyone, especially that young, and to experience in a team environment like this, it was just a really surreal time. The strength of the family, I guess, was the main thing that was inspiring for the players and you know, that season it's easy to say we wanted to really put in performances and stay tight as a group and keep moving on and bring Ulster forward, because that's exactly what Nevin would have wanted.
I think once we got over the initial shock, it became clear that we had to do probably two things. We had to commemorate in the short term Nevin, his father and his brother, and in the long term we had to celebrate Nevin's life and bring purpose as best we could out of the tragedy for Nevin's remaining family. In games that were played that weekend, my memory is of the Stand Up for the Ulstermen being sung. I remember we played Cardiff 2 weeks later, Stand Up for the Ulstermen being sung, and for even amongst our fiercest rivals in Ireland, Stand Up for the Ulstermen was sung. It was really poignant, really moving.
These are not situations that you ever expect to encounter in a chaplaincy situation where something like that happens to one of our young players. You can't rehearse what you're going to do, you can't practice for it. You just have to let the events unfold. So the morning after the tragedy, I was blessed to have the opportunity to go in and to spend just a little bit of time with the players and the staff as we tried to collectively, I guess, gather our thoughts and make some sense out of something that really was senseless. And then in the following week, there were obviously the funerals and also the opportunity to bring the Ulster Rugby public together for the memorial service the Sunday after at Ravenhill. And when I think back on that, the hairs on the back of the neck stand on end when you think of the wonderful outpouring of sympathy and support for the Spence family on that occasion. Over 5,000 people came along on that Sunday afternoon, and I think they appreciated the opportunity that Ulster Rugby gave them to have an outlet for their grief and their pain. And I know the family really appreciated that, the fact that so many would take the time to come and be part of that. It was just a wonderful expression about the game of rugby and how we look after our own and how we stand together in good times and in difficult times.
One night I was just battling in my head probably a lot of thoughts and emotions of, you know, is what I believe true? Is what the boys believe true? Are they where we think they are? Are they still alive in heaven now? And I was thinking through this, and my mum had given me some like duplicates of photos that if I wanted to keep them, and I lifted down just a photo album that I have and started putting the pictures in, and I hadn't been speaking to anybody, and I was just going through thoughts in my head. And there was a newspaper article in it just sitting set into the photo album, and it was this article and I couldn't believe it when I read it. It was the title of it, me thinking all these thoughts is what I believe true, and there in black and white it was an article about Nevin signing his contract with Ulster Rugby. The journalist had used a spin on words for the title, and it said Nevin's in heaven. But little did that journalist know that it would probably have a very different impact on me. Just as I was thinking those thoughts, it was made very clear in black and white that Nevin's in heaven. And I know probably that to people is just coincidence, but sometimes when you're in depths of pain, that there is no answers to what you're dealing with and trying to cope with, that I must admit give me massive comfort. The support that the farming community and the rugby community all over this country has been amazing, and even globally. It was very humbling to see the response. Suppose to us we were just about burying our family. I think we had no idea the impact that the boy's death had made in the country. And one day the postman arrived, maybe a week after the funeral, and he was holding 3 crates, big crates of letters. And I just walked outside and he said, I've never delivered anything like this before in my 20 years of being a postman.
A few of the players would like to go down every once in a while to see the family, mostly because you always get a ton of biscuits and cakes and lots of tea and coffees. But no, I guess it's more just to be able to be close to them, to be able to talk about Nevin, talk about the stories. As I mentioned, they probably didn't really experience just how big a part Nevin was in this environment. So for us to go down, it's nice to hear the stories from them, but also it's nice for us to talk about the moments that we can remember with Nevin in this environment. Like I said, they're a wonderful family. You can understand how Nevin grew up to be the man he was because of the people around him.
Nevin would have been quite, he would have compartmentalised a lot of his life. So whenever he was with us, there wasn't much chat about rugby and his work. And whenever he was at home, there wasn't much chat about us. He kept everything in its place. And I think as he really enjoyed, I think the rest of the family did, being able to hear about the crack that we had together and what we got up to and what he was like at school, because they didn't know that. The fact that we do go out to the farm and have been, it's not, like you said, it's not because we feel any responsibility to, or because we want any praise for doing it, but it's because we know that if it was the other way around, Nevin would be doing the same thing. We know that if it was one of us that had left a mother behind, he would be the first one there to call around, with biscuits and just be Nevin and be a bit of crack, and the least we could do then is try and be Nevin in the situation, Yeah.
I never forget about Nevin, but I live differently. I live grateful, I'm blessed. I definitely think of him a lot and how his life could have been, how his career could have been, and I guess it does motivate me to try my best, try and reach goals that sometimes might not be reachable. Right now, I'm more proud as anything than the impact he had on my life.
After Nevin died, I had to move his car one day, and I went out, and the way if a song is being played in a CD or whatever, when you go back into the car, it just starts playing again. And when I got into the car, turned it on, a song started playing called 10,000 Reasons. I realised this must have been the last song that Nevin had listened to, and I sat and listened to the words of it, and there's a verse in it that says, "The sun's come up, there's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes." It struck a chord with me not that long before I had listened to that song on that Saturday. It was a normal day at 6 o'clock. I remember looking at the clock and life was fine. And by 6:30, our life as a family had changed forever. Suddenly, the 3 men of our house were gone. My mum and dad's family had suddenly been split in 2 in a matter of moments. And that song, as I said, goes on to say, whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. I suppose it was a lesson to me that God is still God, even in the good and in the bad, and that's something that I know Nevin would definitely say to me. And every time I hear that song now, whether it be in church or anywhere, it's definitely, I automatically think of Nevin and hold on a wee bit stronger to my faith, and it helps me cope with that day.
Let me be singing when the evening comes.
Ambassador is a word that's bandied about quite a bit now, but Nevin was a true ambassador for rugby.
We would still have photographs up on the wall in school with Nevin. It's just a way for us to remember Nevin, maybe educate, P5, 6 and 7s a wee bit about Nevin and what Nevin stood for and his legacy, and try to continue that on.
6 weeks ago, myself and my wife Deborah had a little boy, and we wanted to think long and hard about names for all of our kids, really, and middle names we wanted to give our kids would be people who've affected both of us individually or collectively, and we named our son Maximus Robert Nevin McAllister. Robert after my grandfather and Nevin obviously after Nevin, and I'm really looking forward to someday in the future explaining to my son where his names came from, and being proud to do that.
Like, obviously, being from a farm myself and having an older brother and a father that are currently working on the farm, it is something that was very close to me whenever I heard about Nevin's accident. And the good to come from it is that it really threw farm safety into the spotlight, and there's been a lot of stuff done sort of highlighting the deaths on farms, highlighting how important it is for safety, and it is just such a tragic accident, but if something good can come from it, and if something can be prevented in the future, then look, at least something will come from it. And through the HSE and other government bodies, there is a real drive now to show how dangerous farms are and how important it is, and how a split second of a decision or a moment when safety is not taken into consideration, and the catastrophic knock-on effect you can have for potentially the rest of your life.
I think every family that loses a loved one wants their family to be remembered in whatever way possible, and like, we have been very fortunate to that Nevin and Dad and Graham have not been forgot. Of course, for us as a family and immediate friends, they will never be forgot. But to have a centre named after Nevin that is part of this country now and a visitor attraction, and that Nevin's name is just a part of Ulster Rugby now, it's very, very humbling for us as a family. I think Nevin, himself would never have expected, probably ironically, why he deserves it. Even 5 years on, and I know every year that the Ulster Rugby do not forget Nevin and have services and things to for him to be remembered. It's nothing my mum could ask more of, is that she just loves the fact that her wee boy is not being forgot.
When we were building the stadium, we decided to create a museum and education centre in Nevin's memory, to try to bring every school child in the 9 counties of Ulster here, and a much wider community as well here, to understand what Nevin stood for, to understand his groundedness, his excellence, his honesty, his sense of humour, his sense of fun, his sense of treating adversity as something to be welcomed and overcome rather than be defeated, and to try to honour his memory and bring some goodness out of the terrible tragedy.
I think Nevin's legacy will first and foremost be the way he played, and the fact that we can recall with such ease, with a couple of tries that he scored, so that'll first and foremost be what he'll be remembered by, and I suppose the big one now will be the Nevin Spence Centre. When Nevin sadly passed away, Like my eldest son Ben, I think was 2, and my middle one Penny had just been born. Whereas now, for Ben's last birthday in June, you know, he wanted to tour the stadium, and part of that tour was to go around the Nevin Spence Centre with his friends, and Penny was there too, and just to see, obviously they were learning a bit about the history, but just to see the fun that they were having, and the fun and enjoyment around the game of rugby, and that's ultimately what Nevin probably would have wanted to have left, is that yes, rugby for us at the minute is a job, but he grew up loving it, enjoying it, and to see the enjoyment on those kids' faces and with his name tagged to it, for me as a parent, was just, it was brilliant.
We live with the hope that they're alive more than ever in heaven, and someday we'll get to see them again. And probably, I try not to think of things as being, well, it's 5 years I've done without them. I probably, in many ways, try to think I'm 5 years closer to seeing them. I think life is very much about your perspective on things, and that in no way, whether it be that I was involved at the time of the accident, but it's not in any way that I'm wishing my life away. We realised that life is very precious and you don't know what tomorrow brings, and if anything, that has made us live life to the full.